Thank you for tuning in to another episode of One More Story. Just a quick programming note. This episode was recorded prior to the heartbreaking loss to Ohio State, a game that I watched and probably ruined for Notre Dame fans everywhere, including myself. So I apologize. Also, if you would like to skip past the interview and go straight to the first story, you can find it at the 22-minute, 35-second mark, but the subscription option is there for you if you prefer to put on just the stories for the kids. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's episode. My guest tonight is an actor, writer, and Notre Dame fanatic who moonlights as Father Dan Malarkey, a therapist priest who guides Notre Dame football fans through their crippling anxiety. Dan O'Brien, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pete. Glad to be here.
Was that an accurate description of Father Malarkey?
Yeah, Father Malarkey Ministries is a safe place for Notre Dame football fans to kind of express their anxieties about Notre Dame football if they're struggling.
And there's a lot
we
of
always
that.
Seem to be, yeah.
Even in the good times, right?
It's sort of like we're addicted to the bad times even. You know, it's like Notre Dame fans sort of like to be upset. Yeah, I think that's part of the fun. Just get mad. They like getting mad about things. You know, if they like things are going really well right now, we're looking really good, but there's something to be upset about. There's somebody's somewhere, some old Irish guy is upset. They could be related to me.
What are we upset about right now?
You know, the strength of schedule is something you could be upset about. There's things to be upset about. Just anything that goes wrong is upsetting, you know? You could be Sam Hartman scoring like 115 touchdowns and it's like if you go 3 and out, people freak out, you know? It's like they have no patience. If we're not winning a national championship every weekend, it's like, a disaster.
Well, it's been a lot of weekends without a national championship, so.
You're preaching to the choir there, Father Bologna.
Well, so tell us a little bit about this show, where people can find it, what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, no, thanks for asking. This is something that I always would joke about since we graduated from college about 20 some years ago from the University of Notre Dame. A lot of people live and die Notre Dame football. A lot of people live and die whatever their sports team is, right? And like I used to joke that we needed a support group for Notre Dame football fans because people were having so much anxiety watching the games. You know, I'd be texting with my friends from college. Can you believe this? I can't believe this. We're terrible. Why can't we win a game? Brian Kelly's terrible. Charlie Weiss is terrible. Tyrone Willingham's terrible. Why can't we ever get, we all want it to be 1989 again. And I joked about it enough. And then I was finally like, well, I'm an actor. And, the business turned into everybody doing their own thing. And I thought, well, that'd be kind of funny to actually, shoot this and do this. And I created this character, Father Malarkey, Father Dan. Dan Malarkey's a kid I went to grade school with. And I thought that'd be a pretty funny last name for a priest. And I went down to Cotter's Religious Supplies. I think it's Cotter's or Cotner's or something like that. There's a religious supply store in LA. And I bought 4 clergyman shirts and collars in size 16 and a half collar. And that works for some people. Unfortunately, as we're getting a little older, they're getting a little tighter. But we started it out, I guess, almost 4 seasons ago now. It's evolved into just me bringing in funny friends, funny actors, Notre Dame football fans. We went to a game watch together with a bunch of actors who love Notre Dame football. That was also my kind of talent pool, and thought, oh, these guys would be great. And they can share their real anxiety about Notre Dame football. I think you shared some real stuff over the years as you guest starred as Father Peter Bologna, which was very kind of you.
I had a blast doing it. I had to sort of mold my character after, I'm not, you say live and die by Notre Dame football. And I used to as a kid.
Right.
And it would ruin my weekends.
Right.
My father spent Saturdays yelling at the television.
Yep.
And I grew up a Washington football team fan, Commanders at the time. They were not.
I remember that team.
And
go Hogs.
Go Smurfs. Fun bunch, the Hogs. Yeah, because you're from that area
That's
as well.
It, Alexandria, Virginia. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was weekends routinely ruined by Notre Dame football and Redskins football.
Except when we were like 11, 12. What a time to be a Skins / ND fan. Oh my gosh. So you've seen the glory
I have, and it was great. But I mean, I was first introduced to football when it was Jerry Faust was the coach. So I was very young, and they were terrible. But yeah, I mean, 88, 89, I got to see the national championship. But when there were losses, it ruined weekends, and it bled over into Monday, Tuesday for a bit too.
Right.
And so as I've gotten older, I've really checked out of it. You know way more about Notre Dame football than I do.
Well, we're dealing with that same problem in separate ways. I've turned it into art. You just kind of took the safe route and said, that's enough of this foolish behavior, because I would get upset. I would get totally upset and like angry. And my kids or babies being like, why is daddy like stomping around the living room? And I'm like, this is not okay. Yeah. It's like, it's a weird thing to get addicted to, being angry about your football team, you know?
Yeah, no, I remember. So, you know, I was in DC up until I was 10, and then moved to South Carolina in 87. And we were like the only Notre Dame
right.
fan family, you know, down there, because it's all SEC. And the games would be on. So we would get the Notre Dame games because they were nationally televised. But then sometimes they would cut in with a local SEC game and interrupt like the ending of a Notre Dame game.
Oh.
So I remember, yeah, well, I remember my dad calling the television station.
Wow. I appreciate
and
that.
having,
yeah.
And I mean, that's hardcore.
There's right and
like,
there's wrong, and there's wrong and there's right. And you can't wrong somebody like that. I mean, come on now.
But like, I mean, that
happened this weekend, dude. We were playing NC State on ABC, and there was 2 minutes left of the game. And they just stopped showing it. They just stopped showing it and put on another game. And I was like, excuse me, the broadcast was not finished. I mean, we were up 45-24 or whatever, but excuse me, I was watching something. You don't just get to take it away from me.
In the defense of whoever's responsible for programming that game, because of the weather delay. I mean,
that's true. That was an issue. That's true. But that was all over the country. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, because I remember I put it on. What I'll do now is I'll just put it on in the background. And I mean, if it's a big game, I'll sit down and watch. But NC State, I don't know. And
they gave us fits in that first quarter.
Yeah, no, it was close. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, well, we're gonna blow this. I don't want to sit through it anyway. And then so I would just kind of pop in and out, and that's sort of.
That's what you have to do now from now on for us to keep winning. That's the way that theory works. The way you watched that game affected how the team did. So that's what all Irish fans need to sort of start thinking when making, you know, deals with God and stuff. You know, like, okay, I won't watch the game completely. I just kind of come in and out if we can keep winning the way we are, you know.
I mean, hey, whatever works.
Yeah. What do you got to do your part?
So where can people find your show?
We're on Instagram. Follow at Dan O'Brien USA, and you'll see Father Daniel Malarkey. My guests put it out. I also have a Father Malarkey YouTube channel that has to get updated this year. I usually upload them for. I have friends I don't know if you remember Leah Tenniscutter from Notre Dame, but her father is someone who suffers from Notre Dame football anxiety and would get a big kick out of this, but he doesn't have social media. So she's like, can you post these on YouTube? So I started doing that for my dedicated following of like 30 to 40 people. But I do hope that one of these days we can, you know, get ESPN or the Manning brothers to license a little bit of Father Malarkey for their broadcasts, or whoever's doing whatever. NBC Sports, I'm very open to, you know, being their chaplain for Notre Dame games, that kind of thing. Oh, and sometimes Twitter, Dan O'Brien USA on Twitter. When I remember, it's really a small audience. I'm trying to grow it. So, you know, Father Daniel Malarkey, Dan O'Brien USA, you can find me.
All right. Well, we're spreading the word here.
That's it. I appreciate it. Yeah, we got to get you back for this season. We got to get you in the chair.
No, I would love
get you in the collar. Yeah,
get me in the collar. Oh boy. So you recently were part of another Dan O'Brien's book reading. So
yes,
there's a lot of famous Dan O'Briens out there. Do you guys all just know each other? How did this all come to pass?
We're starting to get to know each other. The Dan O'Brien League is getting to know one another through Instagram confusion, basically. Dan O'Brien is my name, and Dan O'Brien is the name of a playwright named Dan O'Brien, who I've been getting confused with since my early days as an actor in New York City and his early days as a playwright in New York. I remember Jamie Williamson, a woman we went to college with, an actress in New York, being like, I didn't know you wrote a play. I just saw you. This is like 2001 or something. I was like, no, that's not me. I think there's a guy, he was doing a play at Here Arts back in the day. A director I remember saying like, oh, my friend is good friends with this other guy named Dan O'Brien. The downtown New York theater world, we had a lot of friends in common, but it just got weirder and culminated in about 20 years later. We've become friends and even live near each other. As he said at his reading, he and his wife's an actress named Jessica St. Clair. They went to college, I think in Connecticut or Middlebury or somewhere like that. And they went to school with Jason Mantzoukas and some other people that they all kind of worked together in UCB and had a lot of success. And so he had all these friends of his come out and do a reading of 3 new books that he just published last week, the Brentwood Country Mart. It was a really great night for a really great cause, Stand Up to Cancer. So Dan and his wife miraculously both survived cancer in the last 5 to 6 years, which, I guess it's time to get tested, everybody, don't delay, because Dan was in his mid 40s and they found stage 4 colon cancer and he's still with us, And he expressed himself in poetry and prose in these books. And you can check him out at by Dan O'Brien on Instagram is his author handle, at by Dan O'Brien. And there was a lot of Julia Louis-Dreyfus was friends with Jessica St. Clair through Veep, perhaps, or some television show they acted on together. So she was there. That was the highlight of the year for me, to get to share a mic with her. It was a great night. And Dan, when he introduced me, told the funny story. I think the first time we met was because I got a check for him from Abrams Artists, who represented him as a playwright and me as an actor. And I remember in New York City getting a check, and it was like a different color than the ones I usually got. And I was like, I was getting residuals for commercials at the time. And I saw this, I was like, wait, what is this? Why is this check dark purple or yellow or whatever it was? And for whatever reason, their accounting department had, switched the names of the addresses. And I had this like check for the Berkshire Theater Festival or something. And as much as I wished I'd been performing at that festival, it was not me. So I think I sat on this money for it was like probably like a couple grand. And I was just trying to figure out who he was. And then when I finally introduced myself, we had this backlog of funny coincidences because his wife's IMDb page linked to me as her husband for many years too. So, we're all just beginners on the internet, guys. Where the internet was growing with us as we established ourselves in the social media landscape and whatnot. But yes, so many different weird things have happened. That check thing happened way long time ago, and then it happened also just like 3-4 years ago too. So we go get coffee now. I give him his residuals, and I worry that some of mine might have gone to him, but I'm pretty sure he'd give them to me too. We've just connected all over the place, and it was a wonderful evening, a wonderful ending. Stand Up to Cancer is the name of the organization that you can follow online and support and donate. They do great work, and check out by Dan O'Brien's books. They're pretty great.
So tell me a little bit about your path as an actor. You went to New York right after college and then ended up in LA.
Yeah, sure. I moved to New York as fast as I could after Notre Dame. I did a play there in the summer of my sophomore year. My older brother was a law student at NYU, and his friend from high school was a New Dramatists playwright. The New Dramatists is an organization in New York City that sponsors about 12 playwrights a year. Some of the greatest playwrights come out of the New Dramatists program, They're right there on 44th Street where the actor studio is. They've got this beautiful old building. So I knew my brother's friend was a playwright, and I was at Notre Dame, sophomore. I knew I wanted to be an actor, and I was going to visit my brother in New York for the summer. And while I was there, I reached out to this playwright and said, hey, are you doing anything I could see? And he said, no, but I'm auditioning for a play, and it's only 30-year-olds auditioning for the younger brother character. So come and audition. And then all of a sudden I got that part. And then the lead actor was a Juilliard guy who got cast in a Broadway tour, and all of a sudden I was the lead actor in this play at the Ohio Theater, this beautiful downtown mecca of theater. It's actually closing this year for they had the Ice Factory Festival, was a new works festival at the Ohio. Robert, whose last name is escaping me at the moment, has fostered so many great new plays. And so that's how I kind of got the bug. I was like, this is incredible. I feel like I'm living in a movie. I was in Soho on Worcester Street, rehearsing in a loft above this old warehouse theater that we did the play in. And, Sonic Youth let us use their studio to record in the music. It was a musical, it was a punk rock musical. And he was friends with the guys, Lee Ronaldo and Sonic Youth. My mind was blown and expanded from what it was like to be at Notre Dame. And so I hustled back to New York. I actually lived with that guy. Sander Hicks was his name. He was a super of a building, and he let me come be his slave, basically, in the basement of his tenement building that he was the super of, and he had an apartment in. I built a little room out of 2x4s and drywall in the basement of this tenement building, and lived on the Lower East Side in walking distance of like at least 6 of the most exceptional off Broadway theaters. It was such a ripe time. It was the second year of the New York, or maybe we were already in the 5th year probably of the New York Fringe Festival at that point. And I was just like a pig in slop. I couldn't believe my luck. I would go out every night to a different theater. I would volunteer at the theaters. I would watch shows. Surf Reality, the Present Company Theatorium, Pianos, Nada Cantoto, all these places down on Ludlow Street. So many great theaters. And felt like I got an MFA, in downtown New York experimental theater. It was great. The St. Mark's Theater. Just met so many wonderful artists. And I just feel really grateful for that time. And I just worked nonstop. I was, doing it for free, just with whoever. The Fringe Festival. Got to go to the Edinburgh Fringe, and that was just kind of where I saturated myself in the theater and met so many wonderful artists. I'm so grateful for it. And then just living in that space, I had friends who were making money in commercials, and I kind of asked them if they could help me get an agent. And then all of a sudden I just started like working constantly in commercials, which is, I know, was an experience you had. You worked a lot in your 20s and 30s, and so did I, and it was a good living. I really I loved it. I'd audition during the day for stuff. I'd do theater at night. I'd make money. I could have a family. I afforded to have a family in New York, which is great. Started having kids when I was like 28, 29, and yeah, man, and just kept going. And then the phone started ringing from Hollywood, like literally from commercials that I did. Producers started calling my commercial agent or the casting office who cast the commercials. Say, where's that guy from the McDonald's commercial? Where's that guy from the whatever other commercial it was? So I realized there maybe is a market for the kind of comedy I was doing in sitcoms. And I got a manager. I was working so hard to get a manager who could get me access to those things. And then he was like, you can start your career in New York, you can end your career in New York, but in the middle, you got to go to LA. So we made the move to LA, came out here 6 months later. I was on an NBC sitcom, went a couple years, and just been a working actor out here ever since,
So how are you spending your dual strike days?
Well, I am grateful that the SAG-AFTRA commercials contract has been in place, even though I voted against that contract because I think it gave away way too much, like to get something that we deserved anyway. It capped network usage at an amount that it didn't need to be capped at. It takes away the shot for an actor to make a lot of money in a commercial, just takes it away so that you could get basic fair pay for streaming and the internet. But anyway, that's in place. So I've actually been quite busy in commercial auditioning the last 2 months. And I shot a commercial for Discover Cards, and I shot promo for Pluto TV, which both with David Shane as a director I've worked with like a dozen times now. I love working with that guy. He's so funny. At O Positive is a production company that he runs, a commercial house. So that's been good. I'm grateful for that. But I definitely am looking for pivots, and actually just started I just got licensed to teach Music Together. It's music and movement classes for infants. We just started teaching in Brentwood. Check us out at musictogethertinyturtles.com, a place to come and sing and play with your baby, and satisfies my love of music and family. Once a week, we're meeting Thursdays at 10:15 right now. I just finished class, and it's a great curriculum. It gives a rich musical experience to infants, as they're trying to learn language, as they're trying to learn all the things how to be a person. If you don't give them that kind of exposure to tone and rhythm, there can be like a lag or a deficit when they want to, start learning how to play music. And if you're giving them lots and lots of music opportunities, then they kind of start to get that innate sense of rhythm and tone. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm also developing a screenplay I think we've talked about in the past. It's a saga that just keeps going and going, but it's the true story of a rebel priest in St. Louis who was defrocked for standing up to a corrupt authority. Archbishop Raymond Burke, who is now Cardinal Raymond Burke, is the biggest critic of the current pope. His name was Reverend Mark Bozek of Poland. And he was laicized and defrocked. He went from ordination to laicization in like 3 years in his 20s for standing up to the archbishop and not closing this little Polish parish that he loved. He fought to keep the parish open as they closed 30 other parishes in like 18 months in 2005 in St. Louis to pay off all their sex abuse scandal settlements. And these guys refused, and he paid for it. And so we got a script written from Teresa Rebeck, who's an amazing woman. It's been in development at Concordia, Jonathan King, who produced Spotlight. And I'm just grateful to all those guys for all the work they put into it. But it's hard. It's hard to keep a movie in the pipeline. And so it's a little bit stalled, I would say, but we're going to bring it to life somehow or another. And those are the things I've been working on.
So how do you wind it down at night?
Well, I'm trying to stay off my phone, that's for sure, and collect my teenagers' phones. I'm trying to, and failing, just trying to get everybody off the screens. The pandemic was tough, but we've started to institute a no screens during the week rule again. We used to have, and then that kind of went, sideways when the pandemic was happening and everybody was doing school on their iPads and their laptops anyway. But yeah, we do story time. My youngest is 12 now, so I'm trying to keep the story time alive. His older brothers aren't as interested anymore, but yeah, we're reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's more adult, but he's heard it before too. He just wants me to reread it. So,
well, speaking of bedtime stories, are you ready to dive into the first story?
Yes, I am, Pete.
All right. So the first word is trash. Once upon a time, there was an elderly man named Cornelius, and he was a mysterious man in the neighborhood, and he would often go on these long walks, and he didn't seem like he was walking anywhere. He was just walking for the sake of walking to get exercise. He would literally stop and smell the roses. If there was a dog or a cat, he would stop and pet it. He was friendly. He would say hello to everyone. Nobody actually knew where Cornelius lived. He was just always in this neighborhood, and nobody really got to know him. Well, one of the things that Cornelius liked to do was he liked to pick through people's trash. And everyone thought that was kind of gross in the neighborhood because trash is generally smelly. It's full of coffee grounds and chicken bones and orange peels if you don't compost. All sorts of nasty things that are decomposing and rotting in the hot sun inside these plastic bins. But those things didn't seem to bother Cornelius, because inevitably he would find one thing every day in a trash bin that he felt was worth keeping. So one day, it was a rainy day, he put on his parka, he went out for his walk, as he always did. He said hello to the folks passing by, he petted a cat, he petted a dog, and he stopped at a particular trash bin, and he opened it, and inside he found
a small, jagged corner of a mirror that had been shattered. And he looked at that small little piece of mirror, and he saw his reflection in it. But his reflection looked like Cornelius when he was a young man. So he shut the lid right away. What was that? Cornelius thought to himself. And he looked up at the house, and the house had boards on the windows. In the rain, it looked a little bit spooky. It looked like no one had lived there for years. The gutters were hanging off. There was a sign that said no trespassing. The garden was overgrown. And so Cornelius, standing there in the rain, in front of a trash can, in front of an old home, shook the water off himself and thought, I must have been dreaming. And he opened the lid to the trash can again, and he reached down inside and grabbed that little shard of mirror and held it up in the rain and looked inside of it. And there was his reflection again. But instead of the old man Cornelius, it was the Cornelius of his youth. And Cornelius stared into the blue eyes of that young man, and the young man in the mirror said, Cornelius O'Boyle, so nice to see you. I've missed you. Cornelius put the shard inside his jacket. He couldn't believe what he had just seen and heard. Was that little piece of mirror talking to him? He needed to go home and take a nap. He was sure there was something wrong with him, so Cornelius tucked the little piece of mirror into his breast pocket, zipped up his parka, and started walking quickly home. But as he was walking, he thought he heard something on the wind, the breeze, something that sounded like a name or a voice he remembered from his childhood. He looked over his shoulder at the house. On the second floor in the window, he thought he saw something. He looked a little closer, and he saw
a dog in the window. And it wasn't any ordinary dog. It was his childhood dog, named Wolfenstein. And Wolfenstein was a beautiful husky. Looked like a wolf. That's why they called him Wolfenstein. And he was sure of it. It wasn't another dog. I mean, these huskies tend to all look alike, but he knew just by the way that Wolfenstein was looking at him that it was his childhood dog, and he was stunned. He was a little bit scared, but he was more curious than scared. And he approached the house. And as he approached that old boarded up house, it started to renew itself. Every step he took on the broken concrete healed beneath his feet and became whole again. Every overgrown bush and weed turned into a finely manicured bush, and the weeds were gone. It was like Dorothy walking into Oz for the first time. It was vivid color. The house was alive. The rain had stopped, and there were birds chirping, and the paint had been restored to its original color. It was a bright yellow, and the shutters were a crisp white. And Wolfenstein, from the top window, started barking at him as he got closer and closer to the house. And he looked around, and he turned around completely to look at the rest of the neighborhood. And the entire neighborhood had changed. It was his childhood home. It was his childhood memory. He was not in the year 2023. He caught his reflection in the front window and saw that young, blue-eyed Cornelius. And he looked down at his hands, and these were not the hands of an old man. These were the hands of a young man. And he felt his arms. They weren't flabby anymore. They weren't old and victims of gravity, just drooping to the ground. They were strong, young arms. And he opened the door, and when he walked inside, he saw
a book of fairy tales that he used to read every night before bed, sitting on the staircase right in front of him. He darted over to the staircase where the book was sitting. He was transported back to all the stories he used to read at night. Stories of princes, stories of paupers, stories of witches, stories of monsters, stories of wolves. And Wolfenstein, his dog, came running up to him and lapping him. And he realized that he was a 10-year-old boy again. And so he tucked the book under his arm and he ran up and down the stairs as fast as he could. It felt so good to be a young boy again. He started running all over the house, doing all the things he wasn't allowed to do when he was a little kid. He started jumping on the couch. Once he finished jumping on the couch, he ran upstairs and started jumping on the bed. He just had so much energy he wanted to get out. He ran downstairs to the kitchen. He opened all the cupboards. He found a box of cereal from when he was a kid that he was never allowed to eat. He opened it up and he poured himself a bowl. All the food was fresh. He cut some strawberries, put it on top of that cereal, and had about 5 bowls of it. Then he went out back, his backyard, and he saw all of his old toys. He grabbed his shovel and he started digging and made a little hole in the ground, built a little fort around it, grabbed some blankets from the bed and dragged them out there, and he and Wolfenstein created a little dugout for themselves where they sat and read the book. And as happens to 10-year-old boys, as they read, they start to get a little sleepy, especially with 5 bowls of cereal in their belly. And he just got more tired, and he couldn't keep his eyes open. And he decided he was going to take a little nap right there in his new little dugout fort. So he rolled over on Wolfenstein, and as he was rolling over, he felt something in his breast pocket. He realized he was leaning on something sharp. It kind of hurt his chest. And when he rolled back over, he pulled out a small shard of mirror. And in that mirror were the same blue eyes of his, but it was a much older man. And he said, "Cornelius, it was so nice to see you again, but it's time to go home." And 10-year-old Cornelius was spooked by this. What was that? He put it back in his pocket. And as he did so, he could feel something change on the wind. It started to drizzle again. He thought, I better go back inside. And he went in the house. The rain started to pick up. And then he started looking out at the front, and he saw the trash can out there. He thought, I better put this piece of trash back in the trash can. And as he left the house, he closed the door behind him because he didn't want the rain and the wind to get in. He looked down at his hand, and right there before his eyes, his hand started to change. It started to get wrinkly and spotty and a little fatter, a little older, and a little saggier. He thought, boy, that's strange. And he decided to keep on going to the trash can to throw out this jagged piece of mirror that had just spoke to him because he didn't want to see that anymore. He lifted the lid of the trash can and he threw it in it. As he closed the trash can, he looked back up at the house, and oddly the house was all boarded up again. And it was raining, and he was in a parka, and he was an old man. And Cornelius, the old man, closed the trash can lid, left the mirror inside, and started walking away in the rain. But he felt an inner peace as he left. He felt like everything was okay. He felt like how good it was to remember what it was to be a little boy and how good it feels to live in good memories. The end.
Dan O'Brien, do you have energy for one more story?
Yes, I do.
The word is mask.
Once upon a time, there was a little white rabbit named Willow Hopper. And Willow Hopper lived in a house with a family. Willow Hopper was a kept rabbit. Willow Hopper was a part of the House Rabbit Society, a society of rabbits who lived with humans and was provided for by humans, and very rarely had to bite humans because the humans would always feed him. But Willow Rabbit used to stare out the back window of this house where he lived with the humans in the House Rabbit Society, and he would long for the days when he used to hop among the willows down by the river. He could see the high grass calling to him from that windowsill where he used to perch himself. And it's not that he didn't have a good life or that he didn't love his family. In fact, he loved this family a lot. Every morning they'd give him pellets in his cage when he woke up. Every night they put hay down for him to make a little bed for himself in his hutch. When the kids used to go off to school in the morning, he could count on the dad to throw him a few little pieces of apple that he'd left over from their lunch boxes. And at night when they came home, he could count on the mom when she was making dinner to throw down a few pieces of lettuce from the salad she was making. But still, the call of the willows was getting to him. And during the day, when the family wasn't at home, he used to sit by that window and think, gosh, I wonder what it would be like. I wonder what it would be like to go back out into the world. So Willow, the rabbit, began to look for an opportunity to escape from his house and his family, to see what he could see in the great wide world down there waiting for him. Lucky for Willow, he lived with a very ill-behaved canine. There was a dog in the family, and that dog didn't follow the rules. Willow knew that he was a lesser species, knew that he was a lesser animal, knew that that dog was going to be his ticket out of this place. So Willow one day decided to create a little trap for the dog, whose name was Felicity. Felicity used to run full steam at things, and there was a certain gate that used to keep Willow in off the deck and out into the backyard. And Willow devised a plan that was going to send Felicity right through that gate and send him back out into the willows that were calling. So Willow devised a plan. Willow got himself covered in hay. He just rolled around in a bunch of water in his cage and wallowed in it. And then he rolled around in a bunch of hay to make himself look like a different kind of animal. And the hay was sticking to him, and he knew that this dog wasn't that sharp and wasn't that smart. So he waited for the dog to fall asleep, and then he completely disguised himself as a whole nother animal covered in hay and fur and pellets, and he looked like something unrecognizable, and he knew this was going to make Felicity crazy when she woke up from her nap. So Willow positioned himself right by that gate and started to thump his foot, which is what rabbits do when they're in danger or they're unhappy. So Willow thumped his foot 3 times. Felicity's eyes opened, and what she saw in front of her was not the rabbit that she knew. It was a furry, crazy, hairy, straw-covered little chipmunk in Felicity's mind. So Felicity ran full steam at that little crazy animal that was sitting there, and right when Felicity got almost up to Willow in his mask, Willow hopped about 4 or 5 feet in the air. He had an unbelievable vertical leap, as rabbits do, right over Felicity's head. Felicity went right through the gate and knocked it over. Now there was nothing between Willow and his grand adventure holding him back anymore. The gate was down, and Felicity was all tangled in it, and just like that, Willow shot out into the yard, into the high grass, and disappeared. He went back under the hedges, into the bushes, and everything smelled so fresh and so alive. It had been so long since he'd been outside in the wild. Everything was his for the taking. He started eating the grass and the clover and the rose bushes and the hedges. Oh, he was so happy to be tasting all those fresh greens again, instead of waiting for the food that the humans left him or the pellets that they gave him in the morning. He found a soft, dry patch of dirt, and he started pawing in it, digging it. He made himself a little hole in the ground and snuck right in there and rolled around in there and felt like $1,000,000. When Willow's family came home, they saw Felicity all tangled up in the gate, and the gate knocked over, and Willow was nowhere to be seen. Well, they were really, really upset. They started screaming for him, "Willow, Willow Rabbit, where are you? Willow, where are you? Willow, come home." But Willow was long gone. He had already shot down into the canyon behind their house and was hopping around and trying to find other rabbits to say hi to or other animals that he could play with. But he was going to get tired eventually. And while Willow was an adventurous soul, he also really liked his hutch that he slept in every night. He'd gotten comfortable there. The hay was nice. The food was pretty good in the morning. So he was hopping around looking for adventure and excitement, and he had the time of his life. He found little nooks and crannies. He found old logs hollowed out that he could go into. He found a dry creek bed that he hopped around in. And he found a lot of really, really nice cabbage and kale and radishes in a neighbor's yard that they'd been growing for months and months and months. He had Swiss chard. He had all the fancy things that people grow in their backyards. He ate them until he couldn't eat anymore. And then the sun started to set. And Willow thought, maybe I'd like to go home before I go any further. I need to get a good night's sleep before I head back out here into the willows. So I'm gonna hop on back home. And he hopped out of the canyon, and he hopped through the neighbor's garden, and he hopped back into his own backyard, where he saw his human family on the deck, calling out to him. All the boys were holding blueberries and strawberries and his favorite food, waving them in the air. The mom was shaking a bag of pellets, and the dad was pacing around on his cell phone, saying things like, well, we know he was in our backyard till about 3 o'clock. If you see a little white rabbit, could you please just call us, or just keep him in your sight, because we'd be lost without him. And then Willow just hopped out of the bushes into the backyard, and the kids screamed, there's Willow, there he is. And they all ran over to him, and Willow started running around the yard, hopping as fast as he could. And Willow was fast. Rabbits are quick. He was moving. There was no chance the boys were going to catch him. He was running in a circle, and the boys were running after him, waving the food at him. But that's when Felicity really proved her worth. She started to chase that rabbit, and she was as fast as him. Now, dogs and rabbits are natural enemies. Dogs are predators, and rabbits are prey animals. So the dog was tapping into some deep canine powers and chasing that rabbit down. And that rabbit knew that he couldn't trust the dog completely, and he better go back into the house and get into his hutch where he was safe. So he split just as fast as a jackrabbit, back into the house, back up the deck, past his family, through the gate that was waiting to be put back up, in the door, right into his hutch, and ran upstairs in the hutch, safe at last back in his hutch. The dog was barking at the door to the hutch, but Willow was safe upstairs in his little rabbit house. And he was glad to be home, because while the great wide world was a lot of fun for him, it's also really nice to come home when you're a house rabbit and a member of the House Rabbit Society. He realized he had it pretty good, and the family put the gate back up, and they put Felicity back into her room, and they closed him up, and they gave him some hay, and they gave him some more pellets, and they put a strawberry and a blueberry into his hutch for him to enjoy that night. And Willow Hopper, the rabbit, decided, I think I'm gonna stay in my house for a while. I've got it pretty good here. And he closed his eyes and went to sleep. The end.